Around the clock work on Mount Charleston continues to restore access on the roads. For now, only residents and first responders are allowed on parts of the mountain. Now there is a federal order to keep people out. Residents have told us they have concerns how long that'll be.
I'm Jimmy Alderson, otherwise known as the Mount Charleston Mountain Man. I love it when I see people come up and enjoy the mountain and learn about the mountain. So will the forest be open this winter?
The man we know as the Mount Charleston Mountain Man has been documenting all the road work across the mountain on social media for folks down in the valley to see the progress. The Lee Canyon resident still gets to enjoy views like this. He wonders when you will too. He and other residents got this federal order that applies to everyone but residents and first responders. It's to stay out of the northeastern part of the Humboldt-Toyabe National Forest and Spring Mountains National Recreation Area. It outlines this area on a map. Violations can be a fine, misdemeanor, or jail time. There is an end date, September 1, 2025.
That kind of caught our eye and began to wonder, are they planning on shutting down the forest for 2 years?
Fox 5 asked the U.S. Forest Service, and yes, that order is in effect out of an overabundance of caution. Officials across the park have told us there will be ski season this year. A spokesperson for the Forest Service says Kyle and Lee Canyon roads must be finished by October 1st. Otherwise, the pavement and materials cannot seal. But much work along Deer Creek Road will take an unknown amount of time and will last through winter season and beyond. The feds say as road work is done this fall, the order can and will be modified. Jimmy says he's glad to hear the reasons why, but he's eager for the day when the checkpoints will end and others can finally come back to see what he loves.
I appreciate everything everybody is doing, get the forest and the mountain back in operating order, and really get mostly is people who come up and they're enchanted. It definitely warms my heart to see that.
And again, the feds say the work to Kyle and Lee Canyon roads has to be finished by October 1st, but it does not mean it's going to open by then. When the roads can open, that's when they're going to modify that order to allow people up the mountain for ski season.